what is the address of the emergency?
I need someone fast.
You think she's beyond any help?
I don't know.
And I can still hear her trying to breathe. I just saw him out in the yard with a gun. My mom was charged with child abuse.
On the 19th of July 2019, the police received a harrowing call from Carlos Hallowell. He described how he just found his mum dead in her bed with an axe in her head. Hi, my name's Sara Jade and welcome to my channel, where we talk about true crime, unsolved cases and more. In this week's case, we're talking about the death of Denise Hallowell. This case takes place by the lake in northwest Florida. Denise is 57 years old and she lived with her son Carlos. They lived in a waterside house by the lake. Denise had grown up by the lake and spent all her summers with her family and her best friend Amy, who lived next door. She'd been working as a teacher and she'd been married twice. She decided she wanted to adopt, as she had been adopted when she was a child and wanted someone to experience a lakeside with her. She contacted an agency that specialised in adopting children from Central America. It took a lot of perseverance and a lot of her money, but soon she was able to adopt a little boy. He was a little boy who was 4 years old and his name was Carlos. He was very bubbly and seemed very happy. As he grew up, he was very bright and was a good athlete on the sports team and was very popular among his friends. His mum adored him and they spent a lot of time together, and one day they decided to move full-time to the lake house. As well as spending time with her son, she also loved teaching, spending time with her friends and going to her local church. On the 19th of July, they had been to a funeral in the morning, and on the way home they decided to stop off for pie. He got his favourite apple pie and she got her chocolate cream. When they got home, they ate their pies and then went to their room for a nap. Carlos woke up a little while later and went to check on his mum and found her with an axe in her head, and this is when he called 911.
911, what is the address of the emergency?
I need someone fast. I need EMTs. I need people.
Okay. All right, stay on the phone with me and take a deep breath and calm down so we can get this information, okay?
I can't.
Do you think she's beyond any help?
I don't know.
Okay. How long ago did you find her?
Just now.
Listen to me. I want you to go outside. Don't touch anything, okay?
I'm outside.
All right, just stay outside with me. I'm going to stay on the phone with you till somebody gets there, okay? Listen to me. Take a deep breath through your nose, okay? And out through your mouth. You have to, okay? I need you to stay calm.
Opening up the gates.
Okay, open the gates.
Oh my God.
Just stay on the line with me, okay?
Oh my God.
When the paramedics turned up to the house, Carlos let them through the front gate. They came through the house and they found his mum in her bed with the axe in her head. She seemed like she was still breathing.
And I could still hear her trying to breathe.
So they waited for the fire brigade to come. They then turned her on her side and started CPR. However, sadly, she passed away. The police started a manhunt straight away, looking for an axe murderer that was loose on their streets. They searched by air, land and water, but couldn't find anyone in the area. As Carlos had been the last person to see her and spent most of the day with her, they decided to bring him in for questioning and ask him to just go through their day-to-day events.
Last time I saw her was around 2:30, 3. We both went to our separate rooms to take our naps for the day, which is what we normally do.
He started scrolling through his phone and watching a couple of videos and soon fell asleep. A little while later, he heard their dogs barking outside. He thought this was a bit strange, as usually they stayed in one side of the house in a little bit cornered off in the garden, but it sounded like they were running around outside.
I hear barking from my side of the house, which is abnormal. Our dogs are supposed to be in that little fenced-in area. So I walk out to the front door. My mom's door is closed as always, but she does let the dogs out every now and then while she's taking a nap to just let them go to the bathroom. So the front door was wide open. I figured she might have forgotten to close it. I looked outside. Our dog, the 2 green gates that you guys walked through, are completely open. So went to go find the dogs, checked around the property looking for them. I couldn't find them, so I went to go wake my mom up to help me find them.
That's when he went into her bedroom and found her with an axe in her head. He started to explain how the front door had been opened and the dogs were running around everywhere. He said they had some intruders in the past, and the fact they lived near the woods, they could hear things in the woods sometimes. In one incident, they even had to call their neighbour over, as someone had started a fire by the side of the house.
Rick even came to our property with his small handheld gun to make sure no one was there. I just saw him out in the yard with a gun, and I was like, what's going on?
After questioning Carlos for quite a while, the social worker takes him over to his girlfriend's house. They explained to her and her parents that his mum had been killed. They asked the parents if they could take him in for a while. However, they didn't think it was a great idea living with boyfriend and girlfriend under the same roof, as she was quite young. So they took him over to Denise's best friend, Amy. She said she was happy for him to stay and helped him to keep busy by organising her funeral. The investigators start to look into the case, and the first person they have on their list of suspects is her second adopted son, Angel. So they went off to go and look for him. Denise had always wanted a brother for Carlos and someone that he could grow up with. So she decided to adopt another boy from Honduras. However, they soon realised that it wasn't really the perfect fit. He'd had lots of issues and a lot of baggage and could be quite angry and aggressive, and they didn't have a great relationship with each other. When he was 12 years old, Denise had called the police and she was quite worried about him as he had run away. When the police turn up, they eventually find him in her best friend's house in the shed. They brought him back to the house. However, when entering the house, they were quite worried. They found that his room was quite bare, his windows were nailed shut, and he had a lock on his door. He also had a bucket near his bed, so the police decide to alert the children protection team. They take Angel away from the house and bring him into a child psychologist who sits him down and has a chat with him.
So Angel, my name is Sunshine, and when you ran away that time, how did you get out?
Oh, from a window.
You got out a window?
Yes.
Okay. And after you got out that time, did your mom do anything to the windows?
Yes.
What did she do?
She unlocked them.
She locked them? How?
Like, she put nails to them, like boards and stuff.
Nails and boards?
Yes.
He also described how she would make him strip down and clean the bathroom naked. He then went on to say that Denise and Carlos used to hit him all the time.
So tell me more about this issue with your mom.
She gets mad and she stabs me and all that stuff. I just like run away.
Okay. And she slaps you? Where will she slap you?
Right on the face.
Both of the children were taken away from Denise and she was put in custody while they investigated the case. Carlos defended his mum and tried everything to get her bail and get her out of prison. He said it was Angel that was aggressive and that she did lock him in his room, but that was for his safety so that he wouldn't run away. He said he never used a bucket and they certainly never did hit him. In fact, he'd been the one that had these violent outbursts and used to throw things at everyone, and that's the reason he didn't have much in his room. While investigating the case, her attorney spoke to Angel and asked him to explain about these outbursts that he used to have. He said that he only had these outbursts when his mum hit him. However, he pointed out that he'd had about 5 or 6 outbursts at school when his mum wasn't around. Also, during the time when they were investigating the case and Angel wasn't in the house, he was staying with another family. And during this time, he'd also had violent outbursts and tried to run away quite a few times. Denise had to wait 5 months while they investigated the case to find out if she'd lose her children and go to prison.
I wasn't done recovering after what happened between my mom, my younger brother, and me. Even though it happened a while ago, I was just starting to come back heavy. I have no idea. It was a big DCF case, and it was even in the newspaper, the Chronicle, and stuff like that. It was my mom was charged with child abuse.
The police did not charge her, and the government dropped all charges against her. During this time, she had lost her job and her name had been tainted in the media, so she decided to do an interview with Fox News so she could get her side of the story across. She mentioned how everything was not as it seemed, and Angel had a lot of problems and needed a lot of therapy. Eventually, Carlos and Denise moved back in with each other, and she also wanted her son Angel to move back. However, the government decided that it wasn't right that he moved back in, and he was then adopted by another family. Eventually, Denise started to put her life back together, and she got a new job helping children with disabilities. Carlos was very happy and was going out fishing and spending a lot of time with his girlfriend. So around this time, Angel was now 15 years old, and they thought that he might be involved in the case. So they go and try and find him. However, it didn't take them long, as he was actually incarcerated in prison for committing armed robbery a few months earlier. This meant that he was cleared from the case, and he hadn't been the one that killed his mum. Her friends described her as very private and couldn't see how anyone would have a problem with her.
I don't know anybody who would have done that. All my mom's close friends, anything would be people at church. This is the only people that I know.
She don't have any enemies?
Not that I know of.
Well, boyfriends or anything? She had issues with boyfriends or?
Not that I know of. If she did, I didn't know about it.
And certainly wouldn't kill her. The neighbours did report that for a while they'd been seeing strange cars come in and out the alleyways of their house. They also mentioned the intruders and how someone had tried to set a house on fire, but they never found out who it was. They also mentioned that some of the animals in the area had been going missing, and one of the ladies had had her cat killed. Based on all the weird things that were going on around the place, Denise had decided to put a security camera on her house. When they started to process the house, they found that there was no damage to the house, none of the locks were broken, and the only footprints they could see was Carlos's when he went to open the gate for the fireman and ambulance to come in. They also found new packages for security cameras that had been set up inside their house. However, when they checked the house, these were missing. They couldn't find Denise's cell phone anywhere. They did find areas where dust wasn't settled anywhere, and they believed that someone had ripped the security cameras out of the wall. This looked very suspicious, so they started to look around the whole area to see if anyone had dumped them in the woods or in the lakes. Luckily, they didn't have to look very long, and the dive team was sent into the lakes, and they came back later with 3 security cameras and her mobile phone. They brought in the cameras and mobile phone to process them to see if they could find any photos or any footage of the murderer on the cameras. They didn't find anything useful on the phone, but they could track the information on when the phone was charged, when it was disconnected, and when it was thrown into the lake, which gave them a better timeline of what happened that day. It was plugged in around 3:12 and then was disconnected about 3:45. And at around 6:18, the phone went berserk, which they believed that this was the time it was dropped into the lake. The cameras were set up to be seen on the phone, but they couldn't find any information on it. They thought it was very strange that a murderer would come into the house, go into their locked garage, open it, find the axe, come into the house, kill Denise, and then go around and steal all the security cameras and leave without anyone noticing. So they start to believe that maybe it was someone closer to home. They start to investigate her son Carlos and find out that actually, in the last few months, he had been having a lot of trouble and had actually been kicked out of school. Tensions had been building between Denise and Carlos, as she just found out he had been expelled from school and he had kept it a secret from her. It was believed that he started drinking and taking drugs and hanging around with bad people. His grades started to slip, and eventually he was expelled from school at the age of 17. He kept this from his mum, and she just found out, and this was causing a lot of arguments between them. He first told the police that him and his mum had a great relationship. However, eventually he did admit there was a lot of tension between them, and they used to have quite big arguments. He said they had these huge fights, and sometimes it got quite verbally abusive, and on occasions he would move out and go and move in with one of his family friends. After talking to him for a while, he finally admits that they did have an argument that day. They had been arguing about schools as he wanted to go to a technical college, however she wanted him to get a 4-year degree. She said that if he went to this technical college, she said she's going to stop payments and not help him at all and not pay for his education. He claimed that she was very verbally abusive towards him and was very critical of his grades and all the people that he hanged around with. He had started partying and dealing drugs from the woods, and this was the reason that all these different cars had been coming in and out of their house. And at one point he had wrecked his car and had tried to kill himself. His mum committed him to a mental health facility to try and get him some help, and he was diagnosed with bipolar and depression and was given medication to help him. When things got worse, he got chucked out of the house and went to live with one of their family friends, Stephanie. They enjoyed having him at the house, but Denise was missing him and Carlos really wanted to go home to his mum. However, before he came back, he gave her a list of demands about how she was going to pay for his schooling, buy him a van and help him go to college. So they patched everything up and soon started to get along again. The police also looked at his police investigation and realised that he was quite calm and wasn't very upset for the fact that he'd just seen his mum killed. His testimony had been all over the place and he never once mentioned the cameras that were missing from the house. The police then go on to check his GPS, and when they track his phone, they see that when he was on the 911 call, he was actually moving around the house, had gone out the house and moved over to the lake. They believe this is the time that he dumped the cameras and her phone into the lake to get rid of the evidence. They also find out by asking some of her friends that she was quite scared of Carlos and had asked them if anything happened to her to please look after her dogs. After 9 weeks of investigations, the police finally arrest Carlos and bring him in for questioning. They asked him again what happened that night, and he gave the same story, how he'd found his mum after he'd woken up from a nap. They then tell him that they had tracked his cell phone data and can see that his phone was never off while he was at the house, which means that he'd never gone to sleep because he'd always been on his phone.
On your phone, there's like no dead time. Your phone's being used almost the entire time.
Yeah, it's probably stay on.
No, I mean somebody physically using it.
They also said that they could track the phone through GPS to the lake, and he couldn't understand this and said, "No, it wasn't me. I didn't go down there."
Like I can see it, but down there.
It tracks you all the way down there. GPS. I mean, it looks like they connect the dots the entire way.
However, they then produced the cameras and her mobile and showed him where they found it.
See, is that looking for you?
No, sir.
There's
Yeah,
cameras
just
on
one.
one side of here.
Okay, then yeah, it's one of the ones that faces on.
There's 3 cameras in the house. What else do you think we could have found in the leak that day? You don't know what else we could have found in there?
No, I'm gonna assume her phone since she's on the camera.
Based on this, he soon opened up and started to tell him about what happened that night. He said that he used to chop a lot of wood when he was angry. He used to go out there and just slice the wood with the axe, and this time he'd been so angry that he decided to take the axe to his mum.
I remember being outside at the shed and grabbing the axe. And that's it. That's all I can remember.
He couldn't remember much of the event until he called the police.
Is that when you call 911 right after?
Immediately.
He was charged with premeditated murder, as they believed that he'd been walking around for about 30 minutes deciding what to do to his mum. They believed that he took the axe from the shed, sharpened it, and then attacked her with it before calling the police. Carlos had spent 2 years in jail before the case went to trial, and at this time he'd changed into a completely different person. He was now fully built out and full of tattoos, and even had them on his face. They put forward the case that Carlos hadn't got what he wanted. He believed that his mum was holding him back and wouldn't let him hang around with his friends and wouldn't support him in what he wanted to do. He took this rage out on his mum that day and hit her over the head with an axe. The defence argued that he had snapped due to the abusive relationship that he'd been in. He said that his mum was quite controlling and had just built up over time. He's also suffering from the loss of his brother and feeling that his mum might just get rid of him one day. She'd once told him and Stephanie that she wanted him gone and never wanted him to come back to the house. This had built up inside of him and then eventually snapped and killed her. However, the jury didn't believe his defence, and after 90 minutes of deliberation, they finally found him guilty of premeditated murder. As Carlos was only 17 at the time of the event, the death penalty was taken off the table. But at the age of 19, on the 14th of September 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison. He will receive a sentencing hearing after 25 years of being in prison. On the day of his sentencing, he apologised to his mum and said he missed her very much and was sorry for what he'd done. So let me know your thoughts and leave your comments below. What do you think happened? Do you think he snapped after having been abused, or do you think he just didn't get what he wanted and took this anger out on his mum? Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.
You call me a saint, but you know I'm a stranger, all willing and able.